Hey folks, I'm Helms, and in this video I will share with you 10 tips on how you can turn your smartphone footage into engaging and thrilling cinematic videos. I got a lot of questions in my last video that was entirely shot on the new iPhone 14 Pro. So let's dissect this cinematic video and reveal the tricks and techniques that in combination make your smartphone footage stand out and really not look like a smartphone. That's the goal here. We want it to look more like a cinema camera. So it's time to jump in. Alright, first things first, let's dial in the right settings. And the easiest way to do this is to lock your exposure and focus before every single shot. On the iPhone, you simply tap and hold the screen on the subject that you want to expose for, and that way when you pan around, the exposure doesn't change. It's usually a dead giveaway of phone footage. Also keep in mind that the iPhones tend to overexpose, so use the exposure adjustment and set it to -0.7 or -1. Now if you want to go the extra mile and dial in a specific shutter speed, most phones, including the iPhones, require you to download a third-party app. I'm using Filmic Pro. Moment has also a great app. I will leave the links down below. But these apps also allow you to shoot in a flat logarithmic color profile. This allows you to retain the most color information and dial in the look in post, which we will talk about later. Now, if you want to achieve natural motion blur on a phone, you, in most lighting conditions, need an ND filter. I've used this clip-on filter here, for example, on the skater shot, and you see that it allowed me to dial in a 180-degree shutter angle rule exposure time. In this case, I shot on 24 frames per second, so 1/50th of a second, and it gives this more organic feel to your images. And then you also want to shoot in the highest bitrate and resolution possible, again to give you more flexibility in post to dial in the colors or crop in. And in the case of the iPhone, I shot most of the footage in ProRes. But be aware that these ProRes files are massive and it takes, I'm not kidding you, even with a lightning cable, hours to download. Now when filming in the iPhone Pro cinematic mode, use it in the right conditions. Brighter light situations, higher contrast, clear edges, so that the software can really design this depth of field. Now this shot here in the train station is a good example where the simulated depth of field looks very nice. Alright, now we're ready to shoot. Motion creates emotion. Use the movement of your camera and or your subject to keep the audience engaged. Pretty much every single shot that I have in this video has a deliberate degree of motion in them. And there are a couple of tools that allow you to create smooth motion. Most popular one, likely the gimbal. I've used it possibly in 90% of the shots in my cinematic video. Just mounted the camera on it, and there's smartphone gimbals, there are bigger gimbals that work with these cameras. Definitely the way to go to create different kinds of motions, but you can also just resort back to a tripod with a pan head so that you can just like create a nice pan smoothly, or use one of these gorilla pods here to mount your camera somewhere. And also I have this rotation motor here, super cheap on Amazon, to create also motion in your time lapses. But truth to be told, you actually don't necessarily need these tools anymore because the image stabilization on these phones is getting better and better. So just aim to get, for example, a parallax shot where your foreground moves contrary to the background, what we're seeing here with a train moving while I move to the left, the train moves to the right, we have a foreground motion as well. So it just adds a lot more energy. You can also add some degree of motion in post, but more on this later. Two things, how you compose your shot and the lighting conditions can make or break the cinematic look. So first, following the golden ratio is the easy hack to get to a nicely composed image. Simply level your horizon at the top or the bottom third of your image and put the focus point, your subject, at the cross points in one of the corners. In this example of the train leaving the station, you see that the platform is at the lower third, basically creating our horizon, and then the train is in the focus point, the end point of the train is in the right top corner, so really nicely creating a pleasing image. And then as photographers and filmmakers, we are hunter for photons, but we want the nicest photons to hit our sensors. So shooting in the right lighting conditions can really up-level your footage quickly. The easiest way to achieve this is to shoot during sunset and sunrise, getting up early in the morning. The softer, warmer light that comes in from a lower angle just gives your footage more atmosphere and depth. And here's a nice example where we shoot right into the sunset and we have the train crossing, showing really off the dynamic range that you can get from these phones these days. So seek out the nice light, get up early in the morning and know your framing basics. No matter what type of video you're shooting, you want to get coverage so that you have more to choose from in post and can build out sequences. Depending on the type of project, I'm like using around 1 to 5% of the footage. So try to get different angles, get low to the ground, get close to your subject, experiment with fresh perspectives. They may or may not work. In this case, this board here was set up as a close-up to set up the scene of him boarding on this one wheel. So also mix up the use of focal lengths. The strengths of phones are usually in the wide angle shots because you don't necessarily expect a depth of field, but only shooting wide angle can be boring and monotonous real quick. So this shot here of the station, I used the zoom camera to get close up to my subject. So use the standard, use the zoom, use the wide angle, all mix it up. And you can also mix up the frame rate. So capture something in slow motion, set up time lapses. And I've done this throughout the video with, for example, the skyline and the movement in the clouds. Pick it dependent on what you are shooting and just use all kinds of tools at your disposal. Alright, now we are slowly but surely transitioning into the edit of such cinematic video, and you want to create a thread, a through line for the viewers to hook onto. This can be achieved through either a story or a general theme. Now in my case, I wanted to show the dynamic nature of the Chicago Loop as my main character in this compilation, but that didn't stop me from having also so-called micro stories in there, with the skater, with a train sequence. These micro stories are a sequence of shots that hold together thematically or tell a small story and help ground your audience. A cheat code to creating intrigue is putting humans in the center. We are a social species at the core that can immediately connect and better sympathize with the narrative if humans are portrayed. So just use that cheat code. I've used it here, for example, just that guitar player and musician. Now, in the context of social media, having an intriguing hook is absolutely crucial to get your audience attention and give them a promise of what to expect in the video. So spend your extra minutes to craft your opener. Put all your efforts in there because it is a promise to the viewer. Now, when you're in your edit, you may find yourself, and I've been there many times before, with a really nice shot that you're really proud of, but it's missing something to make it stand out. And there are a few hacks in post that allow you to create extra visual interest through subtle motion and small effects. So for example, this dolly zoom shot here was completely created in post. So I had a tracking shot, a shot on the gimbal walking towards the bean here, and then in post I basically took the starting point of the image and cropped it in so that the bean is the same size as at the end point, and then had it just transition and change the cropping over the course of the duration, so that in the end the bean is always the same size, but the background is basically moving with it, and that way you can just create an interesting, intriguing shot. Also on the time lapses, I often add a subtle zoom effect or panning so that it creates an additional degree of motion, although they were completely shot stationary on a tripod. Or also adding subtle visual effects like this earthquake shake in this shot. This shot actually I really liked, but it had some shakes at the end of it because I hit a bump. I was actually biking and pointing up the camera on the gimbal, and it just like hit a bump in the street because the streets are not really nice. So I added this earthquake shake effect to intensify the shake, really like cover it up and use it as a means of transition to the next shot. When you use many of these effects, it is usually a good idea to also add some motion blur in post. It not only adds a more natural, more organic dynamic, but it also takes out some of the crazy sharpness that you have with phone footage. Now in a cinematic compilation, it is also important that you carry the viewer smoothly from one shot to the next. Find narrative or visual connective tissues in your sequence so that your edit simply flows and it doesn't feel disjointed. Visually, you can, for example, achieve this by having your subsequent shots follow the same directions. As in this sequence, you can see that orbit always moves in the same direction. Also, keeping your subject in the same point, because if you jump from one shot to the next, your viewer's attention is always to that one focus point of the previous shot. So having those connecting tissues there by picking up where the eye is already helps to just create a nice flow. One bonus tip from my side, and I've done that mistake, don't overdo it with the fancy transitions. I used only the reveal transition twice. Feels very natural. For that, you just want to find an ideally straight line that goes through the screen on your shot, and then you simply mask out one side as it moves across, and that way you have more like a very organic kind of transition to your next shot as well. Now, smartphone footage out of the can look very vibrant and saturated, especially if you shoot in the cinematic mode, as we've already addressed. So ideally you shoot in a flat image profile and dial up the colors and contrast in post to your liking. Shortcuts like so-called LUTs lookup tables can give your footage instantly a different look, manipulating the contrast and the color tones of your footage. Now, this is a pro tip and something that I started using and applied in this video, and it's a plugin called DEHANCER. DEHANCER basically transforms your footage to emulate the look of older film stock. You can select film stock from a long list of profiles from Kodak to Fuji to Agfa, and they're all tuned for different camera models and image profiles, including the flat image profiles that you can get from your iPhone footage through the filmmaking app. So this is like a super easy transformation to get your iPhone footage to look a little bit more like older film stock. To sell that organic feel even more so, you can add effects like film grain, vignetting, halation, blooming, and in many ways you're trying to add some imperfections that classic film cameras and film stock had to give your overly sharp, clean smartphone footage more character, more charm that we know from our favorite movies.
The Force will be with you, always.
I will leave a link to DEHANCER in the description below, and you can get a 10% discount with the code Joey-10. Just like that. And at this stage of the edit, you may also want to add the CinemaScope letterbox bars to simulate that wider aspect ratio you usually get from anamorphic lenses. In fact, the bokeh on the cinematic mode is emulating the anamorphic lenses. So why not add the bars then too? Aside from the story that you actually tell, music is the most important tool to evoke emotions in your viewers and absolutely can dictate the pace of your video. Now, for every video, and I'm not kidding you, I'm spending hours beforehand finding the right song that reflects the right emotion that I want to create, that underlines the story, that inspires me honestly to create. If I have a song that triggers already a cascade of images as I'm hearing it, then I know I found the right one. So take your time and even invest in good quality music. I'm getting a lot of questions on this, so I'm using a few different services like Epidemic Sound and Artlist. I'll leave links with discounts in the description below, but definitely take your time to find the right song that inspires you. Now, like Frankenstein's monster being brought to life through the electric shock, it's alive! Sound effects are what actually bring your scenes ultimately to life. Oftentimes subliminally, the use of Foley and sound effects will absolutely up-level your videos. Just check out this scene here without any sound effects, just the music. And here's the scene with sound effects only. And now all together. I usually add sound effects at the very end of the edit, but as I'm crafting the video, oftentimes there are sequences where I already know that adding the sound effect will actually first make it work. To get the audio, you can either use the sounds that your phone already records, or you can record it separately, get closer to your subject to get cleaner, more isolated sound clips, or download effects from Artlist, Epidemic Sounds, or even the baked-in ones that are in the library of your Macs or your NLEs. But now it's time for you to take your phone and go out and shoot and edit something. I hope these tips were helpful, so I would love to see if you're creating something. Just leave it in the comment section below with the YouTube link. If you have any questions, if you want to learn something more in depth, definitely let me know as well. Don't forget to like this video so that YouTube knows that it's cool content, and also subscribe if you haven't done so already. But as always, have a good morning, have a good night, whenever and wherever you are around this beautiful planet. Bye bye.